We go backstage with Mr. T in his locker room, and he's doing his own interview. He's got nobody there. Gene's not there. Nobody's there. He's saying his fists will be doing the talking in the ring.
This is where the snafu comes in, Jesse. During his promo, the Fink announces that the Orndorff and Morocco results were a double countout while Mr. T is still doing his promo.
The audio from the arena is cutting into him talking with just the most deflating and depressing announcement. Vince had to have been going nuts. You can even hear the boos from the crowd while T's doing his promo. Even with one match in, this is already turning into a hot mess.
Before they went to T, Vince says in the broadcast, "Let's go to the ring for an announcement. Finkel is caught flat-footed. There is something wrong, and you can see him. He's whispering something and looking at ringside, throwing up his hands in a panic. I'm not sure if his mic is working." For some reason, Vince expected Finkel to make the announcement of what happened in Morocco versus Orndorff, and he couldn't. So they go to Mr. T, and then when he does announce it, he's talking. Vince must have pressed that off button and just kicked somebody.
Mr. T's backstage, and it's not my idea to talk him up before a big fight. They bring in Joe Frazier, legendary first ballot Hall of Famer boxer, and he's the trainer of T. We mentioned Lou Duval, the trainer of Piper, along with Bob Orton and his pugilism skills. He is such a great boxer that he permanently broke his hand. Let's put the Haiti kid with Mr. T. Let's put a midget from Haiti with Mr. T too, because this is wrestling after all. And we wouldn't want anybody to take it too seriously. You know what? That guy, they should have called him the hated kid, or maybe the silent guy who doesn't deserve his paycheck kid. I'm not hating on the guy himself. I just think it's ridiculous he's even here. I don't know who decided to put him on the card, but thumbs down. Right. And then she shoved referee Dick Kroll for some reason. It was totally unnecessary.
And you better watch for Vince, ready to jump in the ring at any moment to keep things under control. Ready to catch a loogie in the face, that guy. We get our Wrestlemania debut of the Macho Mania debut of the Macho Man Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth. He's the Intercontinental Champion, taking on George the Animal Steele in the second match at Wrestlemania 2. One thing that struck me, boss, about WrestleMania 2, from Savage to Roberts to the British Bulldogs, we got a lot of guys on this show who would become perennial contributors and stars.
Think about it. Brett's on this show too. So many guys here who would start the transition to a new era of wrestling. We got pomp and circumstance playing. Liz is radiant, acting all shy, looking down. Susan St. James can't believe this gorgeous young girl and how badly he treats her. She's got a massive girl crush. I think she even says that. Let's not forget Susan says that. Let's not forget Susan St. James didn't come in here blind. She was watching. She's a fan. But she's coming in short. She says she's watched since she was a little girl.
No, honey. This is the only wrestling show she's ever seen, including now.
What do you do with someone with that kind of resume? Oh, you put them in booths, of course. You put them in the booth and make them one of the top color commentators for the first damn hour. We get a Savage promo, he says. Steele at the end of the night. You're gonna know how to talk. You're gonna say, "Excuse me, Macho Man. You are the greatest in the world." He's zeroing in on you, George Steele.
So the whole feud started because Macho Man was a real jerk to Elizabeth, treating her poorly while Steele was totally in love with her.
And that Intercontinental title. What was up with that red WWF logo? I don't remember that at all. It's cool, but weird at the same time.
Yeah, for that era, it was the Intercontinental Belt. And the WWF Championship, it's a strange belt, smaller than the Intercontinental title. They took a while to figure out what a good championship belt looked like. That Eagle belt they eventually went with was awesome.
Speaking of awesome, Susan St. James claims that Animal can beat Savage tonight. She thinks George Steele and her expert opinion will win. Vince even suggested that if Animal wins, he might just win Elizabeth's hand in marriage.
Who knows? Susan says if Elizabeth has any taste, she should change boyfriends immediately and be with Animal. I'm thinking to myself, Susan, what kind of taste is that? If you feel that way, honey, why don't you go ask George the Animal Steele out? Maybe that's what she thinks of Dick Ebersol. I bet that one stung Dick in the trunk.
Vince described George the Animal Steele as having a lot of fur. Of course, it's classified as hair, but it almost looks like fur on him. So much of it, except for, well, you know. And there's our first thanks to Vince for Wrestlemania 2. Steele came out with that hard positioning, that Muay Thai style. It really threw Savage off. George Steele was jumping around like he thought he was an Olympian or something. He even threatened to throw a chair from ringside. Savage was definitely intimidated by that hand positioning. He's basically going boogie-woogie to him. Savage freaks out, gets paranoid. He's always paranoid. He thinks he's gonna duck Elizabeth in a second, jumps out of the ring, grabs a chair, and threatens to throw it like a madman.
And we're underway. Savage just kept stalling for the first part. But then they raced around the ring a couple of times. Steele finally caught him and started biting the back of Savage's boot. And if that wasn't enough, Savage sells it. He's like, I'm sorry, these are thick as boots. You couldn't feel it, but he's selling it. It was hilarious. Gonna have good, gonna have beef. Gotta have good, gonna have beef. Gotta have spice, need a little excitement, snap into my calf muscle. Oh yeah.
They give chase and get back into the ring. Savage gets picked up by the gullet and launched out to the apron by George. Savage pulls him back and ends up tied up in the ropes in the process. George did a neat spot. It's kind of cool. And I was surprised. We don't see that anymore. It's almost like the inverse of the typical tied up. In the rope spot, which we almost never see anymore anyway.
Savage goes up for a flying cross, body, and overshot it big time. Yeah, it was quite sloppy. He overshot and landed with a big thud. Steele actually kicked out of it, sending Savage to the floor.
Savage goes under the ring and attacks the Animal from behind, but then still recovers and bites the Macho Man on the same forearm that Jake the Snake's Cobra would bite him 5 years later.
At this point, Susan St. James wonders if George Steele has had his shots.
No, he hasn't had his shots, but he certainly shot on people before. And he's getting his shot at the Intercontinental title tonight.
Savage grabs a bouquet of flowers that someone apparently at ringside had brought to give to Elizabeth. How we know this much about the reason someone brought the bouquet, we will never know. But we know the Animal is behind the bouquet being at ringside.
Savage brings in the flowers and smacks George in the face with them. George, of course, feasts on these flowers. Did I miss them announcing that this was a no DQ match? That's a foreign object. That's a foreign object. That's a weapon. That's a foreign object. Wait, the object is from a different country. No, it's not a foreign object. It's a floral object. It's a floral object.
George then grabs them and stuffs them in Savage's face and lays into him with the flowers. It's flower power here from the Animal. George gets hungry as he is going to have some breakfast. He goes and tears open the turnbuckle pad, revealing the popcorn stuffing in there, as was his signature spot all those years. You see, pretty soon those little bits of styrofoam-esque padding are caught in his chest hair.
Vince finally admits that the ref is allowing some bending of the rules. Susan St. James suggests that maybe it has to do with the referee having feelings for Elizabeth too.
Okay, well, that's just a bridge to nowhere. The story of this feud is that Steele is constantly distracted by Elizabeth. He's in the middle of kicking ass and just completely gets distracted by trying to win Elizabeth's heart while being covered in the foam from the flower petals in between his fur. He pleads for Liz's hand at ringside while allowing Savage to come off the top of the rope with his patented backhandle.
Savage then gets George the Animal Steele up in a big body slam and goes up and hits the blow with out of the sky and only gets 2 off the big elbows. I can't believe that was Savage's trademark finisher.
Here is the quote of the match from Mr. Vincent Kennedy McMahon as George Steele grabs Savage's face, his nose, and says the animal now has a handful of face. What's he gonna do with it?
Vince, he has a handful of heel. You're mixing the roles here. Savage goes upside down in the corner. The ref steps in. Savage then, in the confusion, picks the legs of Steele, trips him up, and stacks him up with his feet off the middle ropes. For the 1, 2, 3, grabs his belt, and bolts out of there.
It's a weird and sudden finish. It's one of those things where you know the big guy falls down, and he basically acts like a beached whale who can't move his shoulders because Savage does not hold George Steele's shoulders down at all. He just has his legs kind of elevated. In 5 minutes, 10 seconds, Randy Savage defeats George Steele with a roll-up in the corner to retain his Intercontinental Championship at Wrestlemania 2. So, you gotta hand it to Macho Man. Even though his debut match wasn't a classic, he found a way to win against the Wild Man, George the Animal Steele. The crowd was electric for most of it.
You said it! It's a shame the match wasn't more memorable, but I'm sure there will be some legendary bouts from Savage down the road. Steele, he was running scared from the Macho Man, trying to avoid that big elbow drop. But Savage, he outsmarted him, using the ropes for leverage to get the pin.
Speaking of outsmarted, Steele ate a turnbuckle post-match and then chased after the ref. What a gimmick.
A classic. It's obvious Savage might have been the better wrestler, but Steele was a wild card, unpredictable. You saw the stalling, the running. It's all about keeping your opponent on their toes. That double axe handle to the outside was a highlight, I gotta say.
And Steele kicked out of that elbow, believe it or not. But the Macho Man, he's a crafty one. He knows how to get the victory.
You know what else was interesting? Those security guys escorting the wrestlers to the ring. I've never seen that before.
It added some legitimacy, like they were real athletes competing in a real sport, you know? But it didn't last long, luckily.
Basil DeVito told a great story about the Roddy Piper versus Mr. T boxing match. Apparently, the New York State Athletic Commission insisted they go through the whole licensing process, like real boxers.
What a riot. They even had a way. And I bet Mr. T didn't want to do that.
Mr. T was hesitant, but Piper convinced him, saying there would be tons of media there.
And what happened?
No media, just a boxing show. Piper had to go in and talk Mr. T up, pretending there were reporters everywhere. Talk about selling the illusion.
That's classic wrestling. They had to do a way in so they could have the boxing match with all the theatrics, the throwing of stools, the shoving of the referee.
And the judges. Cab Calloway and G. Gordon Liddy, you can't make this stuff up.
And don't forget about John Studd and Bill Fralick. Studd. He wasn't exactly playing nice with the NFL player. He was making Fralick look ridiculous.
Studd was out to prove he was the dominant one. He's the stud for a reason, you know. He was dead waiting Fralick, taking advantage of him.
You know, it's interesting how these wrestlers play the psychological game. It adds a whole new level to the matches.
Well said, Jesse. These are the stories that make wrestling so fascinating.